The cold had a voice on this planet. It whistled through abandoned drill shafts, moaned across the icy plateaus, and sometimes, if you listened closely enough in the dead of night, it seemed to weep. Kalen Wren had grown accustomed to these sounds over the past 3 years. They were better company than his own thoughts. The abandoned mining outpost loomed before him as he guided his transport vehicle across the final stretch of frozen ground. Its skeletal framework jutted against the perpetually gray sky, a monument to forgotten industry. Kalen checked his respirator, adjusting it tighter across his face. Outside temperature read -48. Not the worst this planet had to offer, but deadly enough without protection. 2 hours, he muttered to himself, setting the timer on his wrist unit. Get the parts, get out. He maneuvered between the crumbling structures, heading for the central depot. This outpost had been abandoned in stages. First by the major corporations when the rare mineral veins ran dry, then by the independent scavengers when the equipment became too costly to maintain in such hostile conditions. Now, it was just another ghost town on an unmapped border world, occasionally visited by people like Kalen, loners who needed something that civilization couldn't or wouldn't provide. For him, it was specialized engineering components, self-repair systems for his cabin's environmental controls, parts that weren't manufactured anymore because the people who designed them died in the war, along with billions of others, along with his family. The main building still had power, minimal but enough to operate the loading bay doors. Kalen approached the entry panel, brushing away a layer of frost to reveal the interface. He punched in a universal access code he'd purchased from a data broker 3 systems away. The doors groaned reluctantly, opening just enough for him to slip inside. The interior was dark, save for the dim emergency lighting that cast long shadows across the warehouse floor. But it wasn't the darkness that caught Kalen's attention. It was the smell. Underneath the expected metallic coldness and stale air was something organic, something alive. Kalen instinctively reached for the pulse pistol at his hip, clicking off the safety. He hadn't expected anyone else to be here. This outpost was too remote, too depleted of value for most scavengers. Hello. His voice echoed through the cavernous space. No response. He moved deeper into the warehouse, letting his eyes adjust to the low light. The space had been cleared of most equipment long ago, but the far wall was lined with a series of compartments, storage units, perhaps, or... No. Kalen felt his stomach twist as he realized what he was looking at. Holding cells. This wasn't just a mining outpost. It had been repurposed after its abandonment. The slave markets had been thriving during the chaos of the interspecies war, especially for rare or specialized beings. Specialized beings like the telepathic Vespera or the crystalline Norians. Or the Echoes. The Echoes, a race nearly driven to extinction for their unique resonance abilities, their capacity to commune with and manipulate stone, to capture and project memories through mineral structures. Valuable for everything from mining operations to intelligence gathering. Too valuable to be left free. Kalen approached the holding cells, his light revealing empty compartment after empty compartment. Each was roughly the size of a transport crate, with only a narrow bench and a waste disposal unit. No comforts, no dignity. He was about to turn away when a soft sound, barely perceptible even in the silence, drew his attention to the final cell. Unlike the others, this one had a solid door rather than a force field, with only a small viewing port at eye level. Through it, Kalen could make out a huddled form in the corner. Hello, he called again, softer this time. The form didn't move. Against his better judgment, Kalen investigated the door. It had an old-fashioned manual lock, no electronic system to bypass. But beside it was a small display terminal, still functioning. He tapped it, and information scrolled across the screen. Inventory Unit 7 or 9. Classification, Hybrid, Human/Echo. Status, Unsold. Condition, Non-responsive. Disposition, Pendant recycling. Kalen's jaw tightened. Recycling was a euphemism for organ harvesting or material extraction. The Echo's neural tissue contained rare compounds that could fetch a high price in certain markets. As for humans, well, there were always buyers for human parts, especially on worlds where cloning was restricted. He looked through the viewing port again. The figure remained motionless, curled into itself like a wounded animal. No, Kalen could see now, was dressed in a simple gray jumpsuit, standard for interstellar transport of living cargo. Her hair was matted and dull, an indeterminate color in the poor light. She was being left to die. The market had moved on, sold everything of value, and this one, deemed worthless, was abandoned to the cold and dark. Kalen had come for machine parts, not complications, not responsibility. He had spent 3 years cultivating isolation, building walls between himself and a universe that had taken everything from him. His wife, his daughter, his purpose. He should walk away, find his components, and leave this place to its ghosts. Instead, he found himself accessing the terminal again, scrolling through options until he reached the administrative functions. The system required authorization, but Kalen hadn't been a top-tier engineer before the war for nothing. He bypassed the security protocols with a series of commands, gaining access to the cell controls. A purchase interface appeared. Even abandoned, the system was designed to record transactions. No sentient being could be removed without documentation, not because of any ethical concern, but to prevent inventory shrinkage. Kalen hesitated, his finger hovering over the screen. Then he selected Purchase and entered his identification code. Reason for acquisition? The system prompted. Kalen typed, biological recycling. It wasn't entirely a lie. He was taking her from this place. Whether that constituted recycling was a matter of interpretation. The system processed his request, then displayed a nominal fee, barely enough to buy a meal on any civilized world. The price of a life deemed worthless. Kalen authorized the payment, and the lock on the door disengaged with a dull clunk. He pushed it open, the hinges protesting after months of disuse. The cell was colder than the warehouse, and the smell of unwashed body and fear intensified. The figure didn't react to his entrance, remaining curled against the wall, face hidden beneath a tangle of hair. "I'm not going to hurt you," Kalen said, knowing the words were meaningless. Anyone in her position would have heard that promise before, usually preceding pain. He crouched down, maintaining a careful distance. "I'm going to take you out of here. Somewhere warm." Still no response. He wondered if she was even conscious, or if the non-responsive designation was literal rather than just market jargon for uncooperative. Kalen removed his outer thermal layer. He had insulation beneath, and his exposure would be brief. Gently, he draped the coat over her huddled form. "Can you walk?" he asked, not expecting an answer. After a moment's silence, he added, "I'm going to have to carry you." Moving slowly, telegraphing each action, he slid his arms beneath her. She was lighter than he expected, frighteningly so, but her body tensed at his touch, an instinctive reaction that at least confirmed she was alive and somewhat aware. "It's okay," he murmured, lifting her. "Just to the transport. Then we'll get you warm." He carried her through the warehouse, forgetting about the components he'd come for. They could wait. This couldn't. Outside, the cold hit like a physical blow, but Kalen moved as quickly as he dared across the frozen ground to his transport. He managed to open the passenger door one-handed and settled her into the seat, securing the harness around her still-curled form. In the better light of the vehicle, he could see her more clearly. She was young, perhaps mid-20s by human standards, though if she was truly a hybrid, aging might work differently. Her skin had an unusual pale blue undertone beneath the dirt and pallor of captivity. Her hair, though tangled and dull, was a deep silver gray, not from age but nature. Kalen engaged the transport's heating system to maximum as he pulled away from the outpost. The journey back to his cabin would take nearly an hour, and he needed her temperature stabilized. "My name is Kalen," he said after several minutes of silence. "Kalen Wren. I live about 50 kilometers from here. It's not much, but it's warm and safe." He glanced over. Her posture had relaxed slightly, the immediate tension of being moved giving way to exhaustion. Her eyes were closed. "You don't have to talk," he continued. "You don't have to do anything. Just stay alive, okay? The transport hummed across the frozen landscape, its tracks leaving temporary impressions in the snow that would be gone by morning. Just like most things in this place. Just like most people in this universe. But not her, Kalen decided. Not today. His cabin appeared on the horizon as the planet's weak sun began its early descent. The structure was partially built into the side of a rocky plateau for insulation and protection from the vicious windstorms that swept the plains. It wasn't pretty, a patchwork of salvaged materials and functional design, but it was secure. The woman hadn't moved or spoken during the entire journey. Kalen had checked periodically to ensure she was breathing, relieved each time to see the slight rise and fall of the thermal coat still draped around her. He parked the transport in its sheltered bay and came around to the passenger side. "We're here," he said, opening the door. "I'm going to carry you inside now." This time, when he lifted her, she seemed less rigid, either from growing trust or simply depleted strength. He carried her through the airlock and into the main living space of the cabin. The interior was sparse, but not uncomfortable. A main room combining kitchen and living area, a small sleeping quarters off to one side, and a utility space that served as both workshop and bathroom. The heating system hummed efficiently, maintaining a comfortable temperature despite the harsh conditions outside. Kalen gently set her down on the couch, arranging his coat more securely around her. "I'll get you some water and food in a minute," he said. "But first, let's get you warm." He retrieved a proper thermal blanket from his sleeping quarters and carefully wrapped it around her, tucking it beneath her feet, which he noticed were bare and marked with old bruises. "I'll find something for your feet, too," he murmured, more to himself than to her. In the kitchen area, he heated a cup of broth, real animal protein, not synthetic, a luxury he rarely indulged in but kept for occasions when his body needed genuine restoration. This qualified. When he returned to the couch, he found her eyes open for the first time. They were extraordinary, deep violet with flecks of silver, like a night sky dense with stars. Echo eyes, unmistakably. "Here," he said, offering the cup. "It's not too hot. It will help." She made no move to take it, her gaze unfocused despite being open. "Okay," Kalen said gently. "We'll try later." He set the broth aside and instead retrieved a small medical scanner from his equipment. Hovering it over her, he checked for immediate life-threatening conditions. The readings showed severe malnutrition, dehydration, and elevated stress markers, but no acute injuries requiring emergency intervention. "I'm going to clean you up a bit," he told her. "Just your face and hand for now. Is that all right?" Again, no response, but her eyes tracked him slightly as he moved to wet a cloth with warm water. With careful, gentle motions, Kalen wiped the grime from her face, revealing more of the bluish undertone to her skin, a common trait among Echo descendants. There were no Echo purebloods left, as far as anyone knew, but their genetic influence persisted in various hybrid populations across the galaxy. Her face cleaned, Kalen could see the delicate structure of her features. High cheekbones, a straight nose, and lips parched from dehydration. He gently cleaned her hands next, noting the unusual ridges along her fingers, another Echo characteristic, evolved for detecting vibrations in stone. "You need a name," he said as he worked. "At least something for me to call you, until you want to tell me your real one." He thought for a moment. "Lira, is that okay?" It means song in an old Earth language. Seemed fitting for an Echo descendant. Her eyes flickered at the name, the first clear reaction he'd seen. It wasn't acceptance, exactly, but acknowledgement. It was enough. "Lira it is then. For now." Kalen tried once more with the broth, this time holding the cup to her lips. After a hesitant moment, she took a small sip, then another. He didn't rush her, allowing her to set the pace until the cup was half empty. "That's good," he encouraged. "We'll do more later." As night fell outside, turning the gray landscape to pitch black, Kalen prepared his sleeping quarters for her. Fresh linens, another thermal blanket, a small light left on low. "You'll sleep here," he told her. "I'll take the couch. The bathroom is through there if you need it." He pointed to the utility room door. "I'll be right in the main room if you need anything at all." He helped her to the bed, still wrapped in the thermal blanket. She went without resistance, her movements automatic. When she was settled, Kalen paused at the doorway. "You're safe here, Lyra," he said. "No one knows you're here. No one's coming for you. And if they did..." He left the thought unfinished. "Sleep now. Things will be better in the morning." He wasn't sure if that was true, but he wanted it to be. On the couch, Kalen stared at the ceiling, listening to the constant low moan of the wind outside. What had he done? Brought a traumatized hybrid into his home. A woman who might never speak, never connect, never recover from whatever horrors she'd experienced. Yet the alternative had been leaving her to die alone in that cell. Whatever complications he'd invited into his life, they were better than carrying that choice on his conscience. Kalen closed his eyes, exhaustion finally overcoming his racing thoughts. Tomorrow, he would return to the outpost for the components he'd originally sought. Tomorrow, he would figure out what to do next. Tonight, at least, they were both safe. Both alive. It was more than either of them might have expected yesterday, and perhaps that was enough for now. Morning came with a pallid light that barely distinguished itself from the darkness. Kalen woke stiff from the couch, but rested enough. His first thought was of his guest. The door to the sleeping quarters was as he'd left it, slightly ajar. Quietly, he approached and peered inside. Lyra was still on the bed, but she'd shifted during the night. Now she lay curled on her side, facing the door, eyes open and watching. "Good morning," Kalen said softly. "Did you sleep at all?" No verbal response, but she blinked slowly, acknowledgement perhaps. "I'll make something to eat." In the kitchen, he prepared a simple porridge with protein supplement, easily digestible for a system likely unaccustomed to regular nutrition. He brought a bowl to the bedroom, along with a cup of hydration fluid enhanced with electrolytes. "Can you sit up?" he asked. To his surprise, Lyra slowly pushed herself upright, the blanket falling away from her shoulders. It was the first self-initiated movement he'd seen from her. "That's good," he said, offering the bowl. "Here." Her hands remained in her lap. "Like this," Kalen demonstrated, pantomiming eating, then offered the spoon again. After a long moment, Lyra tentatively reached for it. Her movements were clumsy at first, but she managed to feed herself, taking small, careful bites. Kalen watched, feeling oddly proud of this minor victory. "The water, too, when you're ready," he encouraged. When she'd finished about half the porridge, more than he'd expected, Kalen took the bowl. "That's excellent. We'll try more later." He hesitated, then added, "I need to go back to the outpost today, for the parts one went there for originally. I won't be long, 2 hours, maybe 3. Her expression didn't change, but something in her posture did, a subtle tensing. "You'll be safe here," Kalen assured her. "The door locks automatically. No one knows about this place except me." He paused. "Will you be all right alone for a little while?" It was a meaningless question in one sense. She couldn't answer him, and he had to go regardless. But in another sense, it mattered. He was acknowledging her as a person with feelings, with agency, not just a body to be moved and maintained. Lyra's gaze drifted to the window, where snow had begun falling again, then back to him. She gave the slightest of nods. Kalen felt a ridiculous surge of emotion at this tiny communication. "Thank you," he said. "I'll be quick." He left her with water and some dried fruit within reach, showed her how to use the simple waste disposal unit in the bathroom, and made sure the heating system was functioning at optimal levels. "I'll be back before midday," he promised, securing his outer gear. The journey to the outpost seemed longer this time, his thoughts constantly returning to the cabin and its new occupant. He worked efficiently when he arrived, locating the environmental control components he needed and several other potentially useful items. In the daylight, the holding cells looked even more grim, stark reminders of the capacity for cruelty that had survived the war, perhaps even thrived in its aftermath. Kalen found himself standing before the cell where he'd found Lyra, staring at the imprint her body had left in the thin layer of dust on the floor. On impulse, he accessed the terminal again, searching for information about her origins, her capture, anything that might help him understand what she'd been through. But the system had been wiped, standard procedure when a slave market relocated. Only the bare, minimum inventory data remained. Before leaving, Kalen searched the administrative office, looking for any overlooked supplies that might prove useful. In a storage cabinet, he found a small medical kit. Nothing sophisticated, but it contained basic antibiotics and analgesics. Better than nothing. He was about to leave when something caught his eye, a small device tucked into a drawer, partially disassembled. Kalen recognized it immediately. An echo resonance amplifier, designed to enhance the natural abilities of echo descendants. Such devices were rare now, most having been destroyed during the war, when echo abilities became feared rather than valued. This one was damaged, but potentially reparable. Kalen took it, along with a few small tools from the workbench. The snow was falling more heavily as he made his way back to the cabin, reducing visibility and slowing his progress. By the time he arrived, a thin layer of white coated the landscape, softening its harsh contours. Kalen entered through the transport bay, stomping snow from his boots before proceeding to the main airlock. "Lyra," he called as he stepped inside. "I'm back." The main room was empty, and for a moment, panic flared in his chest. Then he noticed the bathroom door was closed, a thin line of light visible beneath it. He set down his findings and removed his outer gear, giving her privacy. A few minutes later, the door opened and Lyra emerged. She'd washed her face and made an attempt to smooth her tangled hair. The jumpsuit was still filthy, but her efforts at personal care were unmistakable. "You look better," Kalen said warmly. "Are you feeling any stronger?" She moved to the couch and sat, her posture slightly more upright than before. Still no words, but her eyes were clearer, more focused. "I found something at the outpost," Kalen said, retrieving the resonance amplifier. "Do you know what this is?" Lyra's reaction was immediate and visceral. Her body went rigid, eyes widening, hands gripping the edge of the couch until her knuckles whitened. "It's all right," Kalen said quickly, setting the device aside. "I'm not going to use it on you. I just thought, if you wanted someday, it might help you. But only if you want. It stays off unless you decide otherwise." Her tension didn't ease immediately, but the flash of panic in her eyes subsided. Kalen mentally kicked himself. Of course, she would associate echo technology with exploitation. That's all it had been used for in recent history, forcing echo descendants to use their abilities for others' gain. "I'm sorry," he said. "I didn't think. We'll put it away." He stored the device in a cabinet, out of sight, and busied himself preparing a more substantial meal than breakfast. As he worked, he kept up a gentle monologue, talking about the cabin, how he'd built it, the weather patterns of the planet, neutral topics that required no response but filled the silence. "I was an environmental systems engineer before the war," he explained as he set a plate of synthesized protein and rehydrated vegetables before her. "Specialized in terraforming technology. Now I mostly fix things for the few settlements nearby. They don't ask questions, I don't answer any. It works out." Lyra accepted the food, eating with slightly more coordination than at breakfast. When she finished, she set the plate aside and, to Kalen's surprise, pointed at him, then at her own chest, her head tilted in question. "Me? My story?" Kalen asked, understanding immediately. She nodded, the gesture small but definite. Kalen sat in the chair opposite the couch, rubbing a hand across his jaw. "It's not very interesting," he said. "Or very happy." Lyra waited, her violet eyes fixed on him with an intensity that made him feel truly seen for the first time in years. "I had a family," he began. "A wife, Maris. A daughter, Eleni. We lived on Vega Prime, where I worked on the planetary restoration project. It was a good life." He paused, the familiar pain surfacing as it always did when he allowed himself to remember. "When the war reached our sector, we tried to evacuate. Our transport was hit." His voice flattened. "I survived because I was in a different compartment, checking on a malfunction in the life support systems. They didn't." Lyra's expression softened, a look of comprehension and shared pain crossing her features. "After that, I couldn't. Every restored world, every revitalized atmosphere just reminded me of what they would never see. So I came here." about as far from thriving life as possible. He attempted a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Not my finest decision, but it's been manageable. They sat in silence for a long moment. Then, slowly, Lyra rose from the couch and moved to stand before him. With deliberate care, she reached out and placed her hand lightly on his shoulder. A gesture of comfort so simple, yet so profound that Kalen found himself fighting tears. It lasted only seconds before she withdrew, returning to the couch, but the impact lingered like a physical warmth. She had reached out, not just physically but emotionally. A connection, fragile as gossamer, but real. "Thank you," Kalen whispered. As the days passed, a routine emerged. Kalen worked on repairing the environmental components, while Lyra gradually regained her strength. She still didn't speak, but her nonverbal communication became more pronounced. Nods, gestures, expressions that conveyed basic needs and responses. Kalen found clean clothing for her. Simple thermal garments that were too large, but far better than the filthy jumpsuit, which they burned in the cabin's heating unit. He showed her how to use the sonic cleansing system for washing, and each day she appeared slightly more restored, the hollows in her cheeks less pronounced, her movements more fluid. A week after her arrival, Kalen was working at his small desk when he felt rather than heard her approach. He turned to find Lyra standing nearby, something clasped in her hand. "What is it?" he asked gently. She opened her palm to reveal a small stone, ordinary, gray, unremarkable except for the fact that she had deliberately chosen and kept it. "Is this for me?" Kalen asked, puzzled. Lyra shook her head. She placed the stone on the desk, then touched her fingers to her throat and made a subtle gesture outward. "For your voice." Kalen guessed. She nodded, then pointed to the cabinet where he had stored the resonance amplifier. Kalen's heart quickened. "Are you sure?" Another nod, more certain this time. He retrieved the device, setting it on the desk beside the stone. "It needs repair," he explained, showing her the disconnected components. "I can fix it, but it will take a few days." Lyra made a circular motion with her finger. "Continue. Go ahead." "All right," Kalen agreed. "I'll start today." The project gave him a renewed sense of purpose. The amplifier's technology was complex, but not unfamiliar. It shared principles with some terraforming equipment. Kalen worked on it during the evenings, explaining what he was doing as Lyra watched with keen interest. The echoes could communicate with stone naturally, he told her, as he reconnected a delicate circuit. They could imprint memories, emotions, even entire histories into crystalline structures. The amplifiers were originally designed to help them during the early collaborations with humans, to bridge the gap between their resonance language and our verbal one. Lyra touched the small gray stone, rotating it gently between her fingers. Later, when exploitation replaced collaboration, the amplifiers were modified to force resonance, to extract information and abilities against the echo's will. Kalen's voice hardened. "That's not what we're doing here. This will only enhance what you choose to share, nothing more." She placed her hand over his for a brief moment, trust, or perhaps gratitude. 3 days later, the amplifier was ready. Kalen set it on the table between them, along with the stone Lyra had selected. "It's very simple," he explained. "The stone rests here, in this recess. Your hand goes here, with the contact points touching those ridges on your fingers. When you want to imprint something into the stone, you press this activation switch. To retrieve or project, you press it twice." Lyra examined the device, her fingers hovering over it without quite touching. "Only when you're ready," Kalen assured her. "There's no rush." She nodded, then picked up the stone and cradled it in her palm for several minutes, eyes closed. When she opened them, she placed the stone in the amplifier's recess and positioned her hand as Kalen had shown her. Her finger hesitated over the activation switch, then pressed down firmly. A low hum filled the room, barely audible but felt in the bones. The stone glowed faintly, its gray surface taking on a subtle luminescence. Lyra's eyes widened, then closed again as she concentrated. The process lasted perhaps 30 seconds before she released the switch, the hum fading along with the stone's glow. "Did it work?" Kalen asked. Lyra picked up the stone, now apparently ordinary again, and placed it in his hand. She pointed to the amplifier, then to him. Understanding, Kalen positioned his own hand on the device, the stone in the recess, and pressed the activation switch twice. The hum returned, stronger this time, and the stone's glow intensified. Then, astonishingly, a voice filled the room, not emanating from the stone or the device, but seemingly from the air itself, resonating with the molecular structure of everything around them. "My name is Lyra now. Thank you for finding me." The voice was female, soft but clear, with an unusual harmonic quality that no human vocal cords could produce. It was beautiful, ethereal, and unmistakably her. Kalen stared at her in wonder. "You can speak." Lyra shook her head, touching her throat with a rueful expression, then pointed to the stone. Only through resonance, Kalen understood. Not physically. She nodded, a small smile touching her lips for the first time. "It's still your voice," Kalen said firmly. "And it's beautiful." That night, after Lyra had retired to the bedroom, Kalen sat at his desk, turning the stone over in his hands. He should have felt triumph at the day's breakthrough, but unease gnawed at him instead. The resonance amplifier was distinctive technology, immediately identifiable to anyone familiar with echo exploitation. If anyone discovered it was here, functioning with an echo hybrid, Kalen's isolation had been his protection for 3 years. Now it needed to protect them both. He secured the amplifier in a locked container, ensuring it emitted no detectable frequencies, even when inactive. He then checked the cabin's perimeter sensors, adjusting their sensitivity to maximum. It was probably unnecessary paranoia. The slave traders had written Lyra off as worthless, non-responsive. They had no reason to search for her, especially on a remote, hostile world like this one. But Kalen had learned during the war that precaution was never wasted. And something in his gut told him that Lyra's value, her true value, not the insulting price he'd paid for her freedom, would be recognized by others if they knew she existed. He wouldn't let that happen. Not to her. Not again. The next morning, Lyra was waiting for him when he emerged from the couch, the stone in her hand, the amplifier already positioned on the table. "Good morning," Kalen said, trying to mask his concern from the previous night. "Did you sleep well?" She placed the stone in the amplifier and activated it. The resonance voice filled the room. "They will come for me." Kalen felt cold despite the cabin's warmth. Ooh, another activation. The collectors. They gather all echo-blooded for their resonance. "But they left you," Kalen pointed out. "They mark you as non-responsive, worthless." She shook her head, frustration evident in her expression. Her fingers worked the amplifier again, but this time the resonance was less clear. Pretended. Had to. They extract until death. I hid my ability. Understanding dawned on Kalen. You pretended to be unable to resonate to avoid being exploited. A nod. And now you're worried they'll discover you're actually capable? Another nod, more emphatic. Kalen sat across from her. How would they know? We're isolated here. The amplifier is shielded. There's no resonance escaping this cabin that could be detected. Lyra pointed to her chest, then to her temple. You think they could track you? Mentally. She activated the amplifier again. Echo bloodlines are tracked. Monitored. When one awakens, they sometimes know. How? Kalen demanded. How do they track echo bloodlines? Lyra's expression became distant, pained. She worked the amplifier. The crystals. From our ancestors. They resonate together, across distance. Kalen frowned. You have such a crystal? She touched her chest, just below her collarbone, and Kalen noticed for the first time a slight protrusion beneath her clothing. Not natural, but something embedded. They put it in you. He realized horror and anger rising simultaneously. To track you. Lyra nodded, her eyes filling with tears for the first time since he'd found her. We'll remove it, Kalen stated flatly. I have medical tools. Basic, but enough for a simple extraction. She shook her head vehemently, activating the amplifier with trembling fingers. Try before. Pain beyond endurance. Linked to nervous system. Kalen cursed under his breath. Of course, the collectors wouldn't make it easy to escape their tracking. They'd ensure that any attempt to remove the crystal would be so excruciating that few would risk it. There must be another way, he insisted. Some way to block the signal, at least. Lyra looked thoughtful, then activated the amplifier once more. The mountain, the stones here, they could shield with proper resonance tuning, like a jamming frequency. She nodded. But wouldn't using resonance to create a shield actually alert them to your presence? Lyra hesitated, then placed her hand on the amplifier again. Initial risk, but once established, the mountain itself would maintain. Natural resonance, not detectable as artificial. It was a gamble, but potentially their only option. If the collectors were already aware of her awakening, they might be on their way. Time was not on their side. What do you need? Kaelin asked. Their preparations took the entire day. Kaelin gathered specific stones from the plateau behind the cabin, following Lyra's careful selection. She chose rocks with particular crystalline structures, testing each with a light touch of her resonance-sensitive fingers. Meanwhile, Kaelin modified the amplifier, adjusting its output to project in a spherical pattern rather than its original directional design. It would drain the power source faster, but they needed full coverage. By evening, they had assembled a circle of stones in the main room of the cabin. Lyra positioned each one with meticulous precision, occasionally closing her eyes as if listening to something only she could hear. Is it ready? Kaelin asked when she finally stepped back from the arrangement. She nodded, though apprehension showed in the tight line of her mouth. What now? Lyra pointed to the amplifier, then to the center of the stone circle, then to herself. You'll sit in the center with the amplifier, Kaelin interpreted. Another nod, and then she touched her fingers to her throat, then expanded her hands outward in a gesture suggesting expansion or explosion. You'll project your resonance, Kaelin said slowly, through the amplifier to the stones and then to the mountain. She confirmed with a nod, then held up her hand, fingers spread wide, and slowly closed it into a fist, containment protection, creating a shield around us. Lyra nodded once more, then surprised him by taking his hand and guiding him to sit with her in the center of the circle. She positioned the amplifier between them, her hand resting atop it, and gave him a questioning look. You want me to stay with you during this? A firm nod, her eyes never leaving his. Of course, Kaelin assured her. I'm not going anywhere. She squeezed his hand briefly, then closed her eyes, focusing her attention on the amplifier beneath her other palm. Kaelin watched as her breathing deepened, became more deliberate. Without warning, the amplifier activated, its hum louder than before. The stones around them began to glow, not the gentle luminescence from earlier communications, but a bright, intense light that cast sharp shadows around the room. Lyra's body tensed, her face contorting in concentration or pain. Kaelin couldn't tell which. The amplifier's hum rose in pitch, becoming almost painful to human ears. The stone's glow intensified further, light pulsing between them in patterns too complex to follow. Then the cabin itself began to vibrate, a low, powerful tremor that rattled dishes in the kitchen and sent dust motes dancing in the illuminated air. The walls creaked, the floor shuddered, and for a terrifying moment, Kaelin feared the entire structure might collapse. Lyra's free hand found his again, gripping with surprising strength. Her eyes remained closed, her expression now definitely reflecting pain. Whatever she was doing was taking a physical toll. Lyra, Kaelin said urgently, is this supposed to happen? Are you all right? She couldn't answer, couldn't break her concentration, but her hand tightened on his. Affirmation or just reflex, he wasn't sure. The vibration intensified, the amplifier's hum now, so high-pitched it was barely audible. The stone's circle glowed white-hot, though emitted no heat. Through the cabin's small windows, Kaelin could see the plateau, behind them glowing with the same unearthly light. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, everything stopped. The stones darkened, the vibration ceased, the amplifier fell silent. Lyra slumped forward, exhausted, and would have collapsed entirely if Kaelin hadn't caught her. Lita, are you hurt? She shook her head weakly against his shoulder, then raised a trembling hand to point at the nearest window. Kalen looked out and gasped. The plateau behind the cabin, previously a dull gray rock face, now shimmered with veins of light, subtle but unmistakable patterns running through the stone like frozen lightning. As he watched, the glow faded, sinking into the rock until it appeared ordinary once more. Did it work? He asked, turning back to Lyra. Her eyes were heavy with exhaustion, but she managed a small nod before they closed completely, her body giving in to the strain of what she'd accomplished. Kalen carried her to the bed, removed her shoes, and covered her with a thermal blanket. He checked her vital signs with his medical scanner, elevated heart rate and blood pressure, signs of extreme exertion, but nothing dangerous. She needed rest, nothing more. He returned to the main room and carefully collected the stones from the circle, placing them in a protective container. The amplifier he left untouched, uncertain whether moving it might disrupt whatever shield Lyra had created. Outside, the plateau appeared normal in the planet's perpetual twilight. But Kalen could feel something different, a subtle pressure in the air, as if the molecules around the cabin had become slightly denser. A barrier, invisible but present. He hoped it would be enough. Lyra slept through the night and most of the following day, her body recovering from the immense expenditure of energy. Kalen maintained a vigil, dividing his time between checking on her and monitoring the cabin's perimeter sensors. Late in the second day, she finally stirred, eyes opening groggily. "Welcome back," Kalen said, bringing her water. "How do you feel?" She accepted the water gratefully, drinking deeply before gesturing toward the main room, where the amplifier still sat. "It's there," Kalen assured her. "Everything seems stable. The mountain hasn't glowed again, but I can feel something. A difference in the air." Lyra nodded, satisfaction evident in her expression despite her lingering fatigue. She made her way to the main room on unsteady legs, Kalen hovering nearby in case she faltered. At the table, she activated the amplifier with a stone they'd used in the ritual. "It worked. We are shielded." "Good," Kalen said, "but you need more rest. That took a lot out of you." She shook her head, working the amplifier again. "No time. They were already searching. Felt them during the resonance." Kalen's blood went cold. "Who? The collectors?" A nod. "How close?" "Another activation. 3 days. Maybe 4. The shield confuses them, but they sense the initial resonance. They will investigate. Then we have to leave," Kalen stated flatly. "I have a transport." "We can." Lyra cut him off with a sharp gesture, then activated the amplifier. "Cannot outrun them. Better to fight here. Advantage of the mountain." "Fight?" "Lyra, I'm not a soldier. I have 1 pulse pistol and basic perimeter defenses. We don't know how many collectors are coming or what weapons they have." Her expression hardened with determination as she worked the device again. "I have resonance. The mountain will help us." Kalen wanted to argue, to insist they flee, but something in Lyra's demeanor stopped him. This wasn't recklessness or bravado. This was calculation. She knew her pursuers, understood their capabilities in ways he couldn't. And more importantly, she had chosen to stand her ground. After who knew how long being powerless, being property, she was making a decision, perhaps her first truly free choice in years. "All right," he conceded. "We prepare to defend. But if it goes badly, we have the transport as backup." "Agree?" She nodded, relief evident in the softening of her expression. They spent the next 2 days transforming the cabin and surrounding area into a defensible position. Kalen recalibrated his perimeter sensors to activate various countermeasures. Nothing lethal, but enough to disrupt and delay attackers. Meanwhile, Lyra worked with the stones from their ritual, placing them at strategic points around the cabin's exterior. She couldn't explain the exact purpose to Kalen, but he understood they would somehow amplify the mountain's natural resonance when activated. On the morning of the 3rd day, the first perimeter alert sounded. A transport vehicle approaching from the east, the direction of the abandoned outpost. "They're early," Kalen muttered, checking the sensor readout. Single vehicle, but multiple heat signatures. At least 4 individuals. Lyra joined him at the monitoring station, her face betraying no fear, only focused intensity. She'd recovered her strength remarkably quickly, driven by necessity and determination. "We have about 20 minutes before they're in visual range," Kalen told her. "Are the stones ready?" She nodded, then pointed to the amplifier, still positioned in the center of the main room. "You'll need to be inside to use it." Another nod. "What about me? What should I do?" Lyra touched his arm, then pointed to his pulse pistol, then to the door. "Defend the entrance," Kalen understood. "Keep them from getting to you while you work the resonance." She confirmed with a nod, her violet eyes meeting his with unwavering trust. "I won't let them take you," Kalen promised, the words emerging before he could consider their weight. But as they hung in the air between them, he knew their truth. Whatever happened today, Lyra would remain free. He would ensure it, whatever the cost. The approaching transport triggered the first defensive measure when it reached the outer perimeter, a sonic disruptor that would disorient most species' equilibrium. The vehicle slowed, then stopped approximately 500 meters from the cabin. Through his viewport, Kalen watched as 4 figures emerged, humanoid in basic form, but their movements suggested cybernetic enhancements. They wore environmental suits modified for combat, with reinforced exoskeletons and what appeared to be specialized sensory equipment. "Collectors," he muttered. "Professional grade." Lyra positioned herself with the amplifier, her hands hovering above it in readiness. She looked to Kalen, a question in her eyes. "Not yet," he advised. "Let them come closer. Let the perimeter defenses thin them out first." The collectors advanced on foot, moving in a practice formation that suggested military training. They bypassed the sonic disruptor with apparent ease, either immune to its effects or equipped with countermeasures. At 300 meters, they triggered the second defensive layer, a network of pressure plates that released targeted electromagnetic pulses. 2 of the collectors stumbled as their exoskeletons temporarily malfunctioned, but the other 2 continued unimpeded. "Damn," Kalen muttered. "They're prepared." At 100 meters, the final automated defense activated, a series of flashbang projectiles designed to disorient and confuse. The collectors scattered, taking cover behind rock formations, but continued their advance after only a brief delay. "Lyra," Kalen said, moving to the door with his pulse pistol ready. "They'll be here in minutes. Whatever you're going to do with the resonance, now would be a good time." She activated the amplifier immediately. The familiar hum filled the cabin, but unlike the shield creation, this resonance was focused and directional. The stones placed outside began to glow, visible through the viewports as points of brilliant light in the gray landscape. The collectors noticed the activation. They halted their advance, conferring briefly before adjusting their equipment. One pointed a device toward the cabin, scanning. "They're trying to pinpoint your location," Kalen warned. "Stay away from the windows." Lyra intensified the resonance, her face showing strain but not the pain of the shielding ritual. The stones outside pulsed in sequence, creating a pattern that spread to the plateau itself. The ground beneath the cabin began to vibrate, not violently, but with purpose. The collectors' communication seemed to falter. They gestured urgently to each other instead of speaking. Then the nearest collector suddenly dropped to his knees, hands clutching his helmet. A second followed, body convulsing. The remaining 2 retreated several steps, weapons raised defensively, though there was no visible threat. "What are you doing to them?" Kalen asked in amazement. Lyra couldn't answer, her concentration fixed on the amplifier and the resonance pattern. But Kalen began to understand as he watched the collector struggle. She was using the mountain's natural harmonics against them, creating a localized resonance that interfered with their nervous systems or equipment or both. The 2 incapacitated collectors managed to crawl back toward their companions, who were now retreating at a more urgent pace. They reached their vehicle and dragged their affected comrades inside. For a moment, Kalen thought they would flee entirely, but instead, the transport repositioned, its weapon systems coming online. They were preparing to attack from a distance, beyond the reach of the resonance effect. Lyra, kaelon varnet. They're going to fire on the cabin. Can your resonance reach them there? She shook her head, frustration evident in her expression, but didn't break her concentration on the amplifier. The transport's weapons powered up, a high-pitched whine, audible even inside the cabin. Kalen calculated the odds rapidly. The cabin's structural integrity against military-grade weaponry. It wasn't favorable. "We need to move," he urged. "We can reach my transport through the back exit." Lyra ignored him, her focus unwavering. The resonance intensified, the hum becoming a physical pressure in the air. Outside, the glow spread further across the plateau, encompassing a wider area. The collector's transport fired, a concentrated energy burst that struck the ground 10 meters from the cabin, sending rock and ice fragments flying. A warning shot meant to demonstrate their capability. Kalen moved to Lyra's side, ready to pull her away if necessary. "Please," he said, "they're going to destroy the cabin." Then, something unprecedented happened. The mountain, the entire plateau behind the cabin, began to move. Not a landslide or collapse, but a deliberate, controlled shift. Stone groaned against stone, ancient layers grinding together as the very earth reconfigured itself. The collector's transport attempted to retreat, but too late. The ground beneath it heaved upward, tilting the vehicle onto its side. Another section of the plateau collapsed, creating a barrier between the transport and the cabin. Through it all, Lyra maintained her connection with the amplifier, her body rigid with effort, sweat beading on her forehead despite the cabin's regulated temperature. The resonance reached a crescendo, the hum so intense Kalen could feel it in his teeth. Then, incredibly, the amplifier's hum took on a modulation, not just frequency, but pattern. It became recognizable as speech. "Leave this place." The voice of the mountain, projected through Lyra's resonance, rolled across the landscape like thunder. The collector's disabled transport's hatch opened, and figures scrambled out, abandoning equipment in their haste to escape the unstable ground. They fled on foot, heading east toward the outpost, occasionally looking back as if expecting pursuit. But the mountain had made its point. The ground stabilized, the resonance faded, and the stone's glow diminished to a soft luminescence before going dark. Lyra collapsed, the amplifier slipping from her hands. Kalen caught her, easing her to the floor. "Lyra, are you all right?" Her eyes opened, exhausted but clear. To his astonishment, her lips moved, and a sound emerged, cracked and hoarse from disuse, but unmistakably her voice. "I am. Not theirs." Kalen stared in wonder, his hand instinctively moving to cradle her head. "You spoke." She nodded weakly. "The resonance freed something inside me." Her voice was different from the resonance projection, more human, less harmonic, but no less beautiful for its imperfection. "They're gone," Kalen assured her. "You drove them away." "Not forever, Lyra whispered, but long enough." She was right, of course. The collectors would return, likely with greater resources, once they reported finding a hybrid capable of manipulating an entire geological formation. Her value had just increased exponentially. "We should leave," Kalen said. "While we have time." Lyra shook her head, a surprising smile touching her lips despite her exhaustion. "No," she managed. "This is home now. Lyra, they'll come back. And we'll be ready." Her voice grew stronger with each word, as if speaking physically healed something long broken. "The mountain protects us. I can feel it." Kalen looked out the viewport at the transformed landscape, the collapsed sections creating natural barricades, the shifted plateau now offering better cover for the cabin. It wasn't his imagination. The mountain had reconfigured itself defensively. "You bonded with it," he realized, during the resonance. Lyra nodded. "It remembers the echoes from before. It will help us." Kalen wanted to argue, to insist they find somewhere more secure. But looking at Lyra's face, determined despite her exhaustion, finally free in more ways than one, he understood. This wasn't just about safety. It was about choice, about standing ground instead of running. All right, he conceded. We stay, but we prepare better. Upgrade the defenses, establish escape routes, maybe even create some hiding places within the mountain itself. Yes, Lyra agreed, her voice growing stronger. And I will practice, learn to control the resonance better. She reached for his hand, and he helped her to her feet. Together, they surveyed the aftermath of the battle through the viewport. I never thought I'd fight again, Kalen admitted quietly. After the war, I just wanted to disappear. You didn't, Lyra said simply. You found me. The implication hung in the air between them, that perhaps they had found each other, both lost in different ways, both needing something the other could provide. Not salvation, exactly, but the opportunity to become more than survivors. In the days that followed, they repaired the minor damage to the cabin and began implementing their improved defenses. Lyra's voice grew stronger as she practiced speaking, though she still used the resonance amplifier for complex communications or when fatigue made verbal speech difficult. I was silent for so long, she explained during a quiet evening as they shared a meal. First by choice, to hide my abilities from the collectors. Then because I forgot how. How did they capture you? Kalen asked, a question he'd been hesitant to raise before. Lyra's expression darkened, but she answered, I was raised in a hidden community. Mixed heritage people, some with echo blood. We lived in the caverns on Tari's Minor. I've heard of Tari's, Kalen said. Supposedly uninhabitable. Supposedly, Lyra agreed with a small smile. The deep caverns were warm enough and rich with crystalline formations perfect for resonance. She paused, gathering herself for the painful part of the story. The collectors found us 3 years ago. They came with suppressors and extraction equipment. Most were taken for immediate harvesting. The strongest were kept for later use. You were among the strong ones, Kalen deduced. Lyra nodded, but I learned to hide my strength, to seem broken, unresponsive. Eventually they classified me as defective and left me at the outpost for final processing. Until I found you. Until you found me, she confirmed, her violet eyes warming as they met his. The only person who ever bought the worthless. You were never worthless, Kalen said fiercely. Never. The conviction in his voice surprised them both. Lyra reached across the table, her fingers lightly touching his. I know that now, she said softly. The touch lingered, neither pulling away, something unspoken passing between them. Not romance, not yet. Both carried too many wounds for that simplicity. But connection, possibility, the acknowledgement that whatever happened next, they would face it together. 1 month after the collector's attack, they completed a joint project, a memorial stone, set at the edge of the plateau overlooking the valley. Kalen had carved the names of his wife and daughter, along with the date of their loss. Lyra had imprinted a resonance that could only be heard by touching the stone, a gentle harmonic that somehow conveyed peace. They stood before it on a rare, clear evening, the aurora flickering across the dark sky above them. It's beautiful, Kalen said, his hand resting on the cool surface of the memorial. Thank you for adding the resonance. They're not forgotten, Lyra said simply. Neither are my people. She had added no names to the stone, for she had never known the individual identities of many in her community. But she had carved the ancient echo symbol for remembered beneath Kalen's inscriptions. Standing there, with the transformed plateau behind them and the vast, open valley before them, Kalen felt something shift within himself, a weight not lifted entirely, but redistributed, made bearable by sharing. When I found you, he said carefully, I had no plan beyond getting you somewhere safe. I never imagined that I would speak, Lyra finished when he trailed off, that I would fight, that we would build something together, Kalen corrected gently. Something that wasn't just survival. Lyra contemplated this, her expression thoughtful. When I was taken, she said, I thought everything ended. Family, home, future all gone. Being worthless meant being nothing. She turned to him, snowflakes beginning to dust her silver hair as the weather shifted. But worth isn't what they decide. It's what we create. Kayla nodded, understanding perfectly. And we're creating something here. Not just defenses or tools. Something more. A haven, Lyra suggested. For those left behind. The idea took root immediately. This remote location, the mountain's protective resonance, their combined skills, it could indeed become a sanctuary for others like Lyra. For anyone discarded, labeled worthless, left to die alone. It won't be easy, Kalen warned. The collectors will come again. Others might too, if they learn what we're doing. Nothing worthwhile is easy, Lyra said with quiet certainty. But we're stronger than they know. They stood together as the snow began to fall more heavily, neither moving to seek shelter. The cold wind sang its familiar song around them, but no longer sounded like weeping to Kalen's ears. It sounded like possibility. Lyra's hand found his, fingers intertwining. I'm not left behind anymore, she whispered. And as the snow settled on the memorial stone, covering the names but not erasing them, Kalen realized that neither was he.